Lucas hadn't been looking for it. Not really. He'd only been cleaning out the office, a task he'd put off for months, one box at a time, trying to convince himself it was time to let go of old drafts and notebooks filled with the scribbled ideas he'd never finish. Most of it was junk. A few half-decent poems, some college-era short stories, a flyer from a high school play he barely remembered being in. Then he found the green leather journal. It had a cracked spine and a faint coffee ring on the front, and Lucas nearly tossed it before the weight of familiarity stopped him. He opened it and flipped through the pages, eyes skimming past rants about bad roommates and character sketches from novels he never wrote. Halfway through, something fluttered loose and fell into his lap, a folded piece of notebook paper. The edges yellowed. The handwriting was unmistakably his. He recognized it at once, though it had been almost a decade. If you're reading this, it means I finally got brave enough to let you know. Or maybe I didn't, and this stayed hidden forever. Either way, I needed you to know the truth. Lucas's chest tightened. He didn't need to read the rest. He already knew what it said. Knew that it ended with everything he'd never had the courage to tell Natalie Brooks. Back then, they'd been best friends. Everyone assumed they'd end up together. Everyone except, apparently, Natalie. When she started seeing Derek, Lucas told himself it was just a phase, that it meant nothing, that if he waited, the timing would work out. He'd written the letter the night he found out they were serious, but never sent it. 2 months later, she got engaged. Now, years later, the letter still hadn't gone anywhere. It had just been hiding in an old journal, buried under a decade's worth of regret. Lucas sat there for a long time, the letter in his hand, the memories pushing at the edge of his chest like waves against worn stone. He didn't notice his phone buzzing at first. It was a message from Kim, his sister. Just FYI, Natalie's back, divorced, helping her dad. Ran into her at the clinic today. She looked tired. Be nice if someone made her feel welcome. Lucas stared at the screen. The universe had a cruel sense of timing. Lucas debated texting her for most of the next morning. It wasn't that he didn't want to see her, he did. In fact, he hadn't stopped thinking about her since finding the letter. But wanting something and knowing what to do with it were two very different things. He brewed a pot of coffee and leaned against the counter, staring at his phone like it might offer instructions. Type, delete. Type, delete again. Hey, heard you were back. Welcome home. Too impersonal. If you ever want to catch up, let me know. Too obvious. Lucas scrubbed a hand through his hair and sighed. He wasn't 18 anymore, and this wasn't just some awkward crush. It was Natalie. And this time there was no Derek, no wedding ring, no clear reason not to say what he felt, except for his fear. Would she even want to reconnect? Maybe she didn't think about the past the same way he did. Maybe she'd moved on, and all he'd be doing was stirring up dust. He poured a cup of coffee and told himself to let it go. Just be polite if he saw her. Friendly. Neutral. His phone buzzed. Is this still your number? I hope it is. I was thinking about our legendary iced coffee wars. You always said hot coffee was morally superior. Want to prove it over a cup sometime? Lucas stared at the message. Then he laughed, one short, startled breath that broke the tension coiled in his shoulders. Of course, she'd be the first to reach out. That was the thing about Natalie. She never held grudges or dramatized things. Maybe she remembered how they drifted apart. Maybe she didn't. But either way, she wasn't acting like someone carrying baggage. He read the message again. Want to prove it over a cup sometime? It didn't say just friends or catch up for old time's sake either. It left the door open. Lucas typed back slowly. Still my number. I have not repented of my preference for hot coffee. Then, after a beat, he added, tomorrow? The reply came seconds later. Tomorrow it is. My treat, but only if I win the argument. Lucas smiled and set the phone down. Maybe this time, he wouldn't stay silent. The coffee shop had changed little. There was fresh paint, maybe, different pastries in the glass case. But the little corner table by the window, the one they used to claim like it was theirs, was still there, still uneven, still bearing a faint scar where someone had once carved initials into the wood. Lucas arrived 10 minutes early. He told himself it was to grab a seat, but the truth was, he didn't trust his composure if she got there first. He sat with his back to the door, sipping his drink, watching his reflection in the glass. Just breathe. His hair was a little shorter than the last time she'd seen him. He'd grown into his face more, at least that's what Kim had said, in one of her rare approving tones. The years had made him steadier, quieter. Whether that was growth or caution, he wasn't sure anymore. 9 minutes late, said a voice behind him. I guess some things haven't changed. He turned, already smiling, and then he saw her. Natalie stood there in a faded denim jacket and a navy scarf, hair pulled back in a loose braid that curled at the ends. Her eyes were the same, clear, warm, and curious, but there was a softness to her expression now, something quieter and more tired around the edges. She looked like herself, only gentler. What caught him off guard was how lovely he still found her. Not in the dramatic, stop traffic kind of way, but in the subtle details he'd forgotten until that moment, like the way her lips curved up a second before she smiled, or how she tilted her head when she was about to make a joke. She looked like the memory of a favorite song he hadn't heard in years. Traffic, he said, after a second too long. I had to make peace with the espresso machine at my dad's house. I lost. She slid into the chair across from him, the motion easy, natural, as if no years had passed at all. Lucas wasn't sure what he expected. Awkwardness, maybe. Distance. Some kind of emotional hangover. But Natalie didn't seem to carry any of it. She smiled at him the way she always had, open, warm, slightly teasing. And just like that, it was as if the time between them had folded neatly in half. I'm glad you came, he said. I almost didn't, she admitted. I've been back a week and didn't know if it would be weird. And now? She shrugged. Still early. They both laughed, and something inside Lucas settled. They talked for over an hour. Not about anything big, not yet. Just about the things that had filled the space between then and now. Her freelance work, his classroom full of ninth graders who didn't understand why history mattered, her dad's worsening hearing, and Kim's latest campaign to get him to live a little. She asked about Miles, too. He's good, Lucas said, smiling. Too smart for his own good. He thinks sarcasm is a language. That runs in the family. Lucas ducked his head, embarrassed by how much the compliment pleased him. When the conversation hit a lull, Natalie glanced toward the door. I should go. I told my dad I'd pick up groceries, and if I'm not back by noon, he'll start trying to walk to the store. Lucas stood with her. This was nice. It was, she said. Thanks for letting it feel normal. As they stepped outside, a cool wind swept down the street. Natalie shivered, and Lucas instinctively reached to steady her as she adjusted her scarf. For one strange, suspended moment, she looked up at him like she might say something more. Then she smiled and turned away. I'll see you around, Lucas. He watched her go, hands in his pockets, heart full of questions he still wasn't brave enough to ask. Lucas told himself he was just being neighborly. It wasn't unusual to help someone move a few boxes, especially when that someone was taking care of an aging parent and trying to rebuild her life from the inside out. It wasn't unusual to offer assistance when someone mentioned offhandedly that her dad's garage door stuck every time it rained. Still, he found himself overthinking what to wear for a 10-minute favor. Natalie had texted him 2 days after their coffee meetup. The garage door is stuck again. Are you still handy with a toolbox, or was that a phase? Lucas had replied that it was never a phase and offered to come by Saturday afternoon. Now standing in her father's driveway, toolbox in hand, Lucas felt like he was about to walk into something more complicated than a repair job. Natalie answered the door before he could knock. She wore jeans and an old gray sweatshirt with the sleeves pushed up. Her hair was down this time, loose around her shoulders, a little windswept like she'd been rushing to get ready. She smiled when she saw him. You showed up, she said. I half expected a polite excuse and a rain check. You know me, I would have come even if it was pouring, he said. I made peace with garage doors years ago. She laughed and stepped aside. Dad's out for a walk. He won't admit it, but he enjoys pretending the sidewalks are still his responsibility. Lucas followed her through the house, noting the updates. There was fresh paint in the front hallway and a different couch, but the smell was the same, coffee and old paper and something faintly citrus, like memory. The garage door was just as she'd described, stubborn and warped near the hinge. Lucas got to work while she stood nearby, handing him tools or making dry commentary about the house falling apart one door at a time. You know, she said at one point, it's weird having you here in this house. Lucas glanced up. We spent half our teenage years here. Exactly. She leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. It feels like I'm 17 again. Like I'm waiting for you to show up with terrible coffee and a stack of flashcards. He smiled. You always hated flashcards. They were your love language. He didn't reply to that, not because he didn't have something to say, but because he wasn't sure she meant it the way it sounded. The truth was, he remembered everything. The late nights studying on her porch, the way she used to nudge his foot with hers when she was bored, the way her eyes lit up when he remembered the small things, her favorite pen, the song she loved but would never admit to. Lucas remembered how much space she took up in his life without ever trying. Pushing those thoughts aside, he tightened the last bolt, wiped his hands, and tested the door. It moved more smoothly, still a little groan near the top, but no sticking. Done, he said. She raised her brows. And just like that, you've restored order to the world. For now, they walked back through the house together. At the door, she hesitated. I am glad you came. Lucas nodded. Me too. She looked at him for a long moment. It's strange, isn't it? How some people fade out of your life and you don't even notice. But others, even after all this time, it feels like no time at all. He wanted to tell her then about the letter, about everything he hadn't said. But the words jammed in his throat. So instead, he gave her a small smile and said, some things don't fade. It was the safest truth he could offer. Kim didn't look up from her mug when Lucas walked in. You're late, she said, which is suspicious. Lucas dropped his keys into the bowl by the door and muttered, good evening to you too. Miles sprawled on the couch, headphones around his neck, scrolling through something on his phone. Is this the part where you admit you have a secret girlfriend? She asked without looking up. I do not have a secret girlfriend. Kim sipped her tea, which is exactly what someone with a secret girlfriend would say. Lucas leaned against the kitchen counter. I stopped by Natalie's to help with the garage door. Kim gave him a look. She texted me, he added. Miles raised a hand. Can we all just take a moment to appreciate how completely obvious this is? I'm 14 and I can see it. Lucas ignored him. It was just a favor. Uh-huh, Kim said. Like how you just happened to clean your truck before driving over and wore that shirt you only wear when you care how you look. It was the one on top of the pile. You're adorable when you lie to yourself. Lucas sighed. It wasn't like that. We caught up, talked. That's it. Do you want it to be it? He hesitated. Kim softened. Lucas, I know it didn't work out before, but that wasn't all on you. And it's not like the door is closed forever. You were just young, scared. So was she. She was with someone else. She was with someone she thought saw her, Kim said. That's not the same thing as love. Miles swung his legs off the couch and stood, stretching. For the record, he said, I like you better when you're single. But if you do fall in love, just don't get all weird about it. I don't need you turning into one of those guys who stares off into the distance and listens to sad music in the car. Lucas gave him a deadpan look. Thanks for the vote of confidence. Any time, Miles said, grabbing a bag of chips from the pantry. You'll still drive me to school if you're heartbroken, right? Go do your homework. As the teenager disappeared down the hall, Kim moved beside Lucas and bumped his shoulder. I'm not pushing, she said. I just don't want you to regret staying quiet. You've done that once already. Lucas nodded but didn't answer. Some truths took time. 2 days later, Lucas found himself standing in the Brooks' front yard again, toolbox in hand. He didn't need to come back. The door had been fixed. But Natalie had mentioned in passing that her father's outdoor railing was loose, and Lucas had offered without thinking. This time, Natalie met him outside. Hey, she said, tucking a piece of hair behind her ear. He's home, just so you know. You've been warned. Is he armed? With a coffee mug and commentary. Good luck. Lucas smirked and followed her up the steps. The front door creaked open before they reached it. Well, well, Richard said, squinting at Lucas. Look who's back. Are you fixing everything in town or just the places with pretty daughters? Just this one, Lucas said deadpan. Richard chuckled and stepped aside. Come on in. I was about to make coffee. Do you take it the same like a grown man? Still do. Natalie gave an exaggerated groan behind them. You two are going to gang up on me again, aren't you? Only a little, Lucas said. Inside, the three of them lingered in the kitchen while Richard moved around slowly, methodically, preparing coffee in the same battered French press Lucas remembered from high school. The small talk was easy, familiar. Lucas had expected awkwardness. Instead, it felt like stepping into an old rhythm he hadn't realized he still knew. You know, Richard said, glancing over his shoulder, I always liked you better than what's-his-face. Natalie groaned. Dad? What? It's true. That guy, Derek, right? He always acted like he was interviewing me for a loan. Lucas kept his expression neutral, though something about the comment settled deeper than he expected. Natalie looked mortified. Can we not do this? Richard handed her a mug. If you want me to lie, you have to give me notice. Lucas laughed softly. It's fine. Natalie shot him a look, but there was a hint of a smile tugging at her mouth. And in that moment, standing in a kitchen full of memories with people who somehow still felt like home, Lucas realized how easy it would be to fall for her all over again. The only question now was whether he'd let himself, and whether he was already at the bottom of the hole. Lucas hadn't planned on staying long. He'd finished the railing faster than expected, tightened the brackets, replaced the corroded bolts, and tested the wobble until it stopped. Richard had made good on his promise of coffee, and Natalie had brought out banana bread she claimed was store-bought, but still somehow tasted like the kind her mother used to make. It should have been a quick job. A hello, a thanks, and a goodbye. But Lucas didn't leave. Instead, he found himself still sitting at the kitchen table half an hour later, nursing a second cup of coffee and watching the lights shift across the countertops like it had a memory of its own. Natalie was sitting across from him, laughing at something her father said about the neighbors. Something about how no one respected fences anymore, literal or metaphorical. Richard had always had a way of sounding like a curmudgeon and a poet at the same time. Lucas realized with a strange pang how much of this he'd missed. Not just Natalie or the almost of it all, but the way things used to feel when life still seemed unwritten. The comfort of long familiarity. The feeling of being part of something that didn't need explaining. He'd forgotten what it was like to be included in the details of her life. Earth to Lucas, Natalie said, grinning. You spaced out. Sorry, he said, shaking his head. Just thinking. You do that a lot, Richard muttered, reaching for more coffee. You were always too much in your head, overthinking everything. Still true, Lucas admitted. Natalie tilted her head. What were you thinking about? Lucas hesitated. Now was not the time to bring up the letter. Not yet. High school, I guess, he said. This kitchen, your mom's iced tea, and that time I tried to fix your porch light and shorted the circuit for the entire back half of the house. Natalie laughed. You were so proud of yourself until the power went out and Mom banned you from electrical tools. I deserved that one. You did. Lucas smiled but didn't look away this time. There was something in Natalie's expression, familiar and new all at once. She wasn't just being friendly. There was a softness there, a stillness that hadn't existed before, or a question she wasn't quite asking. He wondered what would happen if he reached across the table and took her hand, if he said it all and gave her the letter, right here, right now. But Richard stood up, breaking the moment. I'm going to take a walk, he said, grabbing his coat. You two behave. Don't burn the house down. We'll try, Natalie said. When he was gone, the silence settled in again, warmer this time. Lucas looked at Natalie. I'm glad you came. He met her eyes. Me too. They didn't say more. They didn't need to. But as Lucas stepped outside half an hour later, the letter heavy in his jacket pocket, he knew the time was coming. He couldn't keep carrying the past in silence, not when the present was starting to feel like a second chance. He just had to figure out when to open his hand and let the truth fall where it may. Lucas hadn't meant to stop by. He told himself he was just walking off the restlessness, that he liked the quiet of the neighborhood, the way the old trees arched overhead like they were guarding something sacred. But his steps slowed when he reached her block and slowed further when he saw the porch light glowing and the soft movement of someone inside through the living room window. Before he could talk himself out of it, he was already walking up the path. He hadn't even lifted his hand to knock when the door opened. Natalie stood there, looking in surprise, but not displeased. She wore a faded sweatshirt and thick socks, a blanket draped over one shoulder like she'd been curled up on the couch. Her hair was loose. Her face looked relaxed in a way he hadn't seen in a long time. "I was just about to make tea," she said. "Come in?" Lucas hesitated, then nodded. They settled into the living room, the tea steeping between them, the room lit only by a small table lamp and the warm flicker of something classical playing from her speaker. For a while, the conversation was soft, ordinary. They talked about books or how Richard had nearly started a war with the mailman over a misdelivered catalog. Then Lucas told her about how Lucas's students had voted that he was the most confusing but weirdly comforting teacher in the building. Natalie laughed at that. Eventually, the quiet shifted. She grew still, staring down into her mug, then set it aside. Her hands were folded in her lap. "I never told you," she said, "why I came back." Lucas didn't move. "You don't have to." "I think I do." She took a breath. When she spoke again, her voice was low, careful. "We weren't unhappy, exactly. Just unconnected. Derek was kind, polite, always the guy who brought wine to dinner parties and offered to help clear the table. But after a while, it felt like I was living next to someone, not with them." Lucas listened, saying nothing. "I tried," she said. "I made excuses for him, for us. We were just busy and no marriage is perfect. But after my mom passed, something in me cracked. I think I realized I didn't want to wake up 10 years from now and feel like I'd been watching my life from behind glass." Lucas looked at her, and in the dim light, she looked years younger, or maybe just more real. "Did he know?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "Derek wasn't surprised. We didn't fight or argue or struggle to keep something dead alive. We just signed the papers. He wished me well." There was a long pause. "I came back because I didn't know where else to go," she said. "But now," she glanced at him, "now I think maybe I came back to find something I lost." Lucas's breath caught. For a heartbeat, he thought about the letter in his coat pocket. He thought about all the years in between and how they both had been circling the same quiet ache. But he didn't move. He just nodded and said, "I'm glad you came back." Her smile was faint, but it stayed. "Me too." They talked a little longer. When she walked him to the door, she didn't hug him or linger. She just stood there in the porch light, looking at him like he was something familiar and new all at once. "Good night, Lucas," she said. "Good night." When he got home, the house felt too quiet. Lucas stood in the middle of the living room, jacket still on, looking around as if something might call to him. After a moment, he walked into his office and turned on the desk lamp. The old leather journal was still on the shelf, tucked between dusty binders and a cracked copy of East of Eden. He pulled it down, then a notebook, and then another. A pencil rolled out from the drawer and fell into his hand without thinking. Lucas sat down and started to write. Not the letter, not a confession, just words, a scene, a voice, something real, something aching and half beautiful. The pages filled slowly at first, then faster. He didn't notice the time. All he knew was that for the first time in years, the words didn't feel forced. They felt like hers. Lucas left the letter in her mailbox. There was no note, no explanation, just the envelope, tucked under the curve of the metal lid, waiting in the late morning sun. He didn't stay to see her find it. As he drove off, his heart pounding, he wondered if it was cowardice or courage that made him do it that way. In the end, it didn't matter. What mattered was that he'd let it go. After all those years, all those quiet almosts, he'd finally put the truth into her hands. That night, he couldn't concentrate on anything. He didn't write or grade papers. He just kept glancing at his phone and telling himself he wasn't waiting for anything. Around 8, he gave up and drove to Kim's. Miles opened the door mid-sentence, in the middle of a dramatic retelling of something that had happened in gym class. And then he says dodgeball's problematic, which is just code for I suck at it, and, hey, it's Uncle Lucas. Lucas offered a distracted smile. Hey, champ. Miles squinted. You look like someone who just mailed a breakup letter to a celebrity. Close, Lucas muttered, stepping inside. Kim was already at the kitchen table, folding laundry with quiet efficiency. She looked up, catching something in his expression before he said a word. "You did it," she said. Lucas nodded and dropped into the chair across from her. "I left it in her mailbox this morning," he said. "The letter I wrote her years ago." Miles dropped onto the couch behind them, waving a hand. "This is way more romantic than your usual vibe. Did you sign it with your name or like, forever yours or something?" "Eat your snack," Kim said without looking at him. Lucas ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know what I thought would happen. I don't even know if she's read it yet." "Do you want her to say something?" Kim asked gently. "I don't know." He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. "Maybe I just needed her to know, to stop pretending it didn't matter." Kim nodded, then stood and walked over to the sink, rinsing her hands. "Give me a second," she said, nodding toward the hallway. "Miles, homework. Now." "That's unfair," Miles muttered, dragging his feet. "We were just getting to the good part." When he was gone, Kim turned and leaned against the counter. "Lucas," she said softly, "you're my little brother. I've watched you since you were a toddler, and I've never seen you look at anyone the way you look at her, not once." "I'm scared she won't feel the same," he said. "She does," Kim said simply. "Maybe she always did. You gave her time to come back to herself. That's what love looks like. It doesn't push, it waits." Lucas looked down at his hands. "What if I was too late?" Kim crossed the room and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're not," she said. "You're just finally on time." An hour later, Lucas was back home, still uncertain, still restless. He just kicked off his shoes and turned on the porch light when a car pulled into his driveway. He froze. Natalie stepped out slowly. She was in jeans and a soft sweater, hair pulled back in a low knot. She looked like she hadn't rehearsed what to say, like she'd gotten in the car the moment she finished reading. She climbed the steps with deliberate calm and stopped in front of him. "We need to talk," she said. Lucas nodded once. Then he opened the door and let her in. Lucas hadn't planned what he would say. Now that she was standing in his living room, jacket unzipped, hands clasped in front of her, everything he'd rehearsed in his head felt small, trivial. She looked both steady and unsure, like someone who'd just opened a door and wasn't sure what she'd find on the other side. He offered her tea, but she shook her head. They stood in the quiet for a moment before she smiled, just a little. "So," she said, "I found your letter." Lucas tried to return her smile. "I figured. It wasn't in the mailbox, you know. Not when I checked." His brow furrowed. "My dad found it," she said. "I think he was hoping it was a rebate check or a sample of fertilizer or something. Instead, he walked into the kitchen, waved it in the air, and said, 'Well, about damn time that boy started writing you love letters.'" Lucas laughed, the tension in his chest easing. She walked to the couch and sat down. He followed, settling beside her at a cautious distance. "I didn't know," she said after a moment. "Not really. I mean, I wondered once or twice, but you were always so quiet." "I was terrified," he said. She looked over. "I was afraid I'd ruin what we had, that you'd laugh, or worse, that you'd pity me. So I waited, and then I waited too long." Natalie nodded slowly. "You know what's wild? I wrote you one too." Lucas blinked. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, worn at the edges. "I wrote it the night before I got engaged. I thought, maybe if you knew how I felt, you'd stop me." He stared at it. "You were going to give it to me?" "I lost my nerve," she said. "I told myself it didn't matter, that I was being foolish, that if you hadn't said anything, it meant you didn't feel the same." She placed it in his hand and whispered, "We're a pair, aren't we?" Lucas managed a breathless laugh, fingers trembling, as he unfolded the page. "Do you want me to leave?" she asked. "While you read it?" He shook his head. "No, stay." She sat beside him while his eyes scanned the page, while her words, written in a younger hand but no less sincere, spoke to him across the years. "I think I've always been waiting for you to say something, but maybe I'm the one who needs to be brave now, because I'm afraid that if I don't tell you how I feel, I'll spend my life wondering what we could have been. I love you, Lucas. I don't know when it started. I just know it never stopped." He closed his eyes for a moment. When he looked back at her, his eyes were damp. She reached for his hand. He didn't let go. "Thank you," he whispered, "for writing it, even if you didn't send it. Just thank you." They leaned in together slowly, carefully, as if testing the weight of this new world they'd both stepped into. And when their lips met, it wasn't urgent. It was soft, quiet, full of everything they hadn't said and everything they didn't need to say anymore. Afterward, they rested their foreheads together. "I don't want to miss anything else," Lucas said. "Then don't," Natalie whispered. And just like that, the years between them stopped mattering. It was spring again, the kind of soft, golden afternoon that made Lucas want to sit outside with a book and forget the world for a little while. The air smelled faintly of lilac and cut grass. Birds had built a nest in the corner of the porch roof, and Natalie said it was a sign of luck, though she refused to say how she knew that. Lucas was sitting on the porch steps, notebook open on his knee, when the screen door creaked behind him. Natalie came out barefoot, balancing 2 glasses of lemonade. She handed him one and dropped onto the step beside him. "You're scribbling again," she said. "I'm thinking." "Same thing." He smiled without looking up. "You're nosy." "Only about you." She leaned into his shoulder, resting her head there for a moment. They sat like that in peaceful silence, the kind that didn't need filling. Inside the house, tucked away in the top drawer of their bedroom dresser, were 2 old letters, creased, yellowed, full of words they'd both once been too afraid to say. They didn't need them anymore, but neither had thrown theirs away. Some truths deserved to be kept, not because they were unfinished, but because they had finally led somewhere worth keeping. Original heartwarming fiction every week. Subscribe for your next great story.